Sean Hannity went on his radio show, and the new thing, this isn't really new. Fox News has been doing this for a while. Right-wing commentators have been doing this for a while. But what they try to do is posture as like, we are the supporters of the working class. But whenever you get into the specifics of the actual policies that they support, you learn it's all a facade. It's all a veneer. It's kabuki theater. They do not, in any way, shape, or form, represent the needs of the working class. So here, Hannity's going to be talking to his guest about, I know what it's like to go from the bottom up and live in poverty and get out of it. And he's trying to be like, sympathetic to people who are struggling in today's day and age with wages stagnating and going down because of inflation and all that stuff. But he lets the mask slip at the end and tells you what he really thinks. Take a look.
David Bahnsen is with us, founding and managing partner of the Bahnsen Group. He wrote the book, There's No Free Lunch, as we talk about the Biden disastrous economy. Let me ask you the question from the standpoint of somebody that knows what it's like, me, to struggle to pay rent and not have much money in the early part of my adult life. It wasn't fun. I didn't really I was too stupid to realize that I was broke. But I struggled every month for a good while to pay rent and feed myself. Obviously, there was no money for restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. Ate a lot of meatloaf. But my question to you is simple. What do people, this middle class that, according to the Penn Wharton study, is paying anywhere from $3,500 to $5,000 more per household because of Biden's inflation? What do you recommend for them? They're scared to death. They see the stock market has been as volatile as ever. They're not sure what to do. They can't buy a new car. They can't, if they sell their used car, they won't have a car. Prices are through the roof there too. So the people are really in a bind right now. What do you advise them as an economic advisor? What do you tell them to do?
Well, I come from a similar background as you, that my economic lot in life now is not what it was early on. And I remember having to struggle for food and gas in the car and all those things. And I will tell you that right now, people that are suffering in the current environment, the two areas that I think are governmental caused inflation are housing and energy. They are, unfortunately, victims of very bad policy. They need to vote right. They need to take this seriously in a civic and political sense. And then, of course, the thing that Americans have always done is we have to overcome it. They have to get out there and work, and we have to be entrepreneurial and creative.
And there are a lot of jobs available for people to take second jobs.
So their solutions after this long conversation is vote right, which I think you meant vote correctly, but they also mean right wing. Vote right and take a second job. All that to lead people to that conclusion. Just vote for Republicans, shut up and take a second job and just work harder. Guys, what if I told you not everything was a bootstrap problem? Not everything was a personal moral failing issue. Some of the hardest people I've ever known worked multiple jobs and could barely pay the bills if they could pay them at all. I've told the story before. A guy I knew in high school, Kevin, he worked 3 jobs. Was basically living below the poverty line at working 3 jobs. Barely could get by. Incredibly hardworking all the time. Barely could get by. We have an entire category in this country called working poor. The minimum wage is not a living wage. You can work full time and still not make enough money to survive. Now, is that the individual's problem? Or is that just a really terrible system that's set up? Which doesn't, ironically, it doesn't reward work. And it's ironic because we're told that this is like the whole point of capitalism, meritocracy. It's like, if it was a meritocracy, then people who were working full time, none of them would live in poverty. I don't remember. Do you guys remember the story that came out probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but there's been a number of them since then, where it's like, if you're working full-time at minimum wage, you can afford a 1-bedroom apartment in, I think at one point it was 1 state in the country. Now it might be 0. So, and then, you could say, well, what about a studio apartment? And it's like, well, I don't know if you can afford anything anywhere working a full-time job at minimum wage. Does that seem right? Does that seem fair, especially in a country where we have incredible wealth and income inequality? I mean, just totally off the charts, where billionaires have gotten trillions wealthier as the working class has been struggling. there was the report from the Rand Corporation that came out years ago now. Now it's over 50 trillion, but when the article came out, the top 1% has effectively stolen 47 trillion from the bottom 90%. So in other words, if you just take the level of income and wealth inequality post-World War II, actually I think it was from like 1970 something in the report. So if you take that same income and wealth inequality that we had in like 1975 and you kept it the same until today, everybody in the bottom 90% would have an extra $1,144 per month, every month for their entire life. That is how much surplus value is being extracted by the top 1%, by corporations and the mega wealthy. And that's just saying, let's go back to the 1975 distribution of wealth and income. That's what that is. If you just kept that the same and the ratio didn't get more out of whack, you guys remember, we've covered it. What was it? The pay ratio, the CEO to the average worker used to be anywhere from like 25 to 1, and maybe it was 40 to 1 at one point, and then now it's like around 350 to 1. That's just indicative of what's happened with the system. And of course, it's happened over time because the Supreme Court said basically money equals speech. So you have a free speech right to corrupt politicians if you're wealthy or a corporation. And so they've bought the politicians, and the politicians have rigged the rules in favor of the wealthy and against the working class. We should have never outsourced all the jobs that we did, destroyed so many great cities like Detroit. We never should have done the outsourcing. Never should have Reagan with his war on unions absolutely obliterated union membership in this country. It's not a coincidence that when union membership was the highest in this country, that's when the working class was in its strongest position. That's not a coincidence. So tax policy now, even with the Trump tax cuts, many in the working class are paying a higher effective tax rate than billionaires. Is that fair? Should taxes be higher as a percentage on the working class than on billionaires? I certainly don't think so. So there's so many things you can actually do to fix this problem. So many things. You pass the PRO Act, pro-union piece of legislation, which is phenomenal. You do $15 minimum wage. You do universal health care. You do universal education. You abolish student loan debt. You do paid vacation time by law. There are all these things that you could do which would drastically improve the lives of working class people. Minimum wage needs to be a living wage. And instead of saying, hey, here's what we should do, they say, vote right and go take a second job. Well, I got news for you. This idea, it's a myth, this idea of like, the harder you work, the further you go, we live in a meritocracy. That is definitely not the way it works. That's just not the way it works. And not everybody's going to be able to climb that economic ladder. Somebody like Hannity got lucky, whoever he's talking to. Sometimes you just get lucky. And by the way, one of the differences I've experienced, I've realized myself anecdotally, is that when you talk to a leftist, they're much more willing to say that part of the reason they made it, if they do well, is just luck. It's just luck. I'll tell you guys, I was largely lucky for this show with my timing, the way the timing worked out, and already being an established show by the time the Bernie wave came along. Like, a lot of it is just luck. A lot of it is luck. So, raise taxes on the wealthy and redistribute it and give people a chance. Get closer to an actual meritocracy. But that's not what these guys want. They just want to say, vote right and work harder. Okay, and what happens if they do that and their life not only doesn't get better, it gets worse? Through no fault of their own, what happens then? You don't have any answers because you're not in the business of answers. You're in the business of propaganda. You don't want real policy that helps the working class. You would call that socialism and scoff at it. So anyway, know who these guys are because they're making it very clear. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.